Live from Los Angeles, welcome back to Good Morning LaLa. There are some guests that you interview that are it's just, you have no idea. This man and how he's touched my life and touched millions and millions and millions of lives. William Arntz is in the house. He was the producer, director, and the master behind What the Bleep Do We Know? And also author. You've done so many amazing projects. I'm so honored to have you here today.
Well, thank you. It's great to be here.
Yeah. So let's begin. Of course, I want to get to your book. I want to get to everything. But I want to know your personal journey. Something massive occurred in your own spiritual journey to come to developing a project like What the Bleep Do We Know?
Well, there was a couple of things. One, I started out my professional career as a scientist, as a physicist.
Oh, really?
So I did laser physics for the early Star Wars type programs. And then after that, I went off and did other things. I did computers, but then I started doing all the spiritual study. So I had the science and spirituality. But what really got me going is back in the 80s and 90s, if you were doing spiritual study, people thought you were a wacko. It's like, oh, when are you going to get the Kool-Aid, right? And so it was really looked down upon. And, you know, I got to tell you, that pissed me off. It's like, no, the people I know who are doing it, they're thoughtful, you examine yourself, it's a lot of work, you read, you study. This is not flake ball stuff. And so I thought, I'm going to put a movie out there that really gives you a sense of what it is, with all the science, how it intersects with the spirituality,
quantum physics,
the quantum physics, the whole bit. So,
but what prompted that for you? When did you decide I want to develop my own spirituality? Or
is there a moment?
No, it kind of crept up on me because I grew up in a religious family and I didn't like all the dogma, so I was out the door. It took me a while. I started first reading metaphysics. You know, from physics, you go to metaphysics. And then from there, I would read all these books and I would talk about doing the self-inquiry and meditation. And I'm like, that's boring. I don't need that stuff. And after about 10 years of ignoring it, I said, I think I really need that stuff. And then I started getting into more internal aspects of it. And then, you know, I got a teacher, got another teacher, and off I went.
Oh, I love it. I think one of the things that is part of your genius is you're a bridge, and you sort of build these bridges between different domains and genres like spirituality and science, and you help people to uncover the truths that are being shared, but they're just being shared in different languages, right? And so talk to us a little bit about that. Like, how are you able to do that? Because I think the real genius is being able to take very complex, sophisticated topics and break them down into something that's easy to process and digest. Is that a challenge when you're putting together a movie or a book?
Well, it's definitely a challenge, but it's something I just always do. I did before this, I wrote had a couple software startup companies, very complex problems, but for some reason I always find the simplest way to do it. If you can do it with 3 moving parts instead of 4, you do with 3. So for some reason, I'm able to boil stuff down. So in What the Bleep, there are those scenes like on the basketball court with that to show the quantum entanglement and whatnot. And I always think of the simplest way because it won't break and it's easy to communicate.
Dr. Quantum. I mean, this has changed our lives. Okay, so tell us about the film came out in 2004, correct? And tell us a little bit about what that was like. How many? I mean, I can't even imagine how many people you impacted millions and millions and millions of lives, and those people have gone out and impacted millions of lives.
Well, the goal was to get 100 million people around the planet to see it. That was kind of the goal. And when we did it, it was one of those things like, well, that's kind of a big goal, but we were talking about creating reality, right? And manifesting, and we're like, okay, let's do it. And we think we pretty well got there because it played all around the country. People started at one point I went to Bali and people said, oh, we love your film. Everyone here has seen it. And I said, I don't have a distributor here. I'm like, I don't care. Glad you saw it. So that's that.
So what's been some of the moments that touched you the most of the butterfly effect of it? Besides sitting right here with me.
Well, there's that. Okay. Well, I'll tell you the one that sticks with me. We were noticing the emails that came in, and we had 9 emails where people said either they or a friend of theirs were going to commit suicide. And for some reason, one guy said that he just flicked on the TV. He was ready to do it. I'm just going to watch one more thing. What the Bleep comes on. They watch the movie, and it's like, what was I thinking? And 9 people told us I mean, that's a very dramatic effect, but people who just said they saw it and they're like, oh my God, what the bleep was I thinking?
I just love that. And of course, in Miracles, they talk about a miracle being a shift in perception. And I think that's one of the things you do extraordinarily well. Talk to us a little bit about the book and how you're sort of doing that with the book.
Which is genius. By
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. How to Suffer in 10 Easy Steps. Well, I know a lot of people in the self-help movement, after What the Bleep, that they all write books. And I kind of roll my eyes a little bit because it's like how to get infinitely wealthy in 4 easy steps, how to find your true love and things. It's generally not easy. So I'm kind of like, I think that's kind of, and so my wife one day was laying on the couch, her back was out. I said, do you want to go get something to drink? And she said, no, I just want to lay here and suffer. And it just hit me because no one says that.
Yeah.
No one actually uses the S word, suffer.
Yeah.
And I said, just there? She goes, yeah, I'm just going to perfect suffering. And then I said, someone should write a self-help book about that. Because we joke about that sort of stuff. And it's this sort of thing where you think you're going to wake up the next day. It was funny, you laugh about it. Next day you come to your senses and you forget about it. A month later, I'm still thinking about it. And I realized it's the one self-help book that actually delivers on its promise.
Deirdre, we love you, by the way. Big shout out.
Because everyone suffers. No one wants to suffer, so therefore it must be really easy to do. So you get the book and we'll deliver on the promise.
I just love that.
That's just the first half. The second half, though, get a little more serious and really get more into the, what it is in suffering. And really the bit about the people don't use the S word. When was the last time someone said, how are you doing? And someone says, I'm suffering. It's always the external. Oh, my boss hates me. Oh, this happened. Oh, the dog just ruined the carpet, whatever it is. But no one ever actually says the internal state, suffering. And because of that, you ignore it and then you keep suffering.
Yeah, it's always somebody or something else's fault.
Right. There's a chapter on that, blame.
Right.
There's blame them, blame God, blame...
So what do you do when we're still human. We
Yeah.
have all these distinctions. We have enlightenment moments, and there's still moments of a suffering. What do you do
What do I do?
when you are in a suffering state?
Well, it depends. I mean, there's a lot of different reasons that it comes about. I have this concept in there of it's kind of silly, but a sufferometer. And the sufferometer is this device where you measure your suffering. And part of it, there's a wisdom wheel where you say, how do I want to get out of the suffering? Because sometimes you're freaked out about something in the past that someone said. So the solution to that is move your attention into the present. Then there's something you're worried about someone who said something to you and you're going to see them in a bit. And there's a judgment and you're really pissed at them. And so you're all suffering because what am I going to do? And then maybe you say, no, I think it's time to forgive them. Maybe it's time just to move that. So there's different ways you can move your awareness in order to change your suffering state. And that's what we talked about.
I remember the moment I learned the basics of the moment I put a positive meaning or a negative meaning, I instantaneously felt a positive or negative feeling. And I was like, okay, that's the most profound thing ever. Like, I mean, to take responsibility is great, and there's a lot of responsibility in it, right?
There is. But for this reason, if you say, okay, you're feeling miserable, and you just stop and you say, like my wife did, I'm suffering. I'm just going to lay here in suffering. And sometimes if you just get in, because we all push everything away.
I don't want to suffer.
I don't want to suffer,
no.
so let me go get a better job. Let me go do this. Let me go do this. No, just maybe you should just sit there in 5 minutes and just really experience it. And then after 5 minutes, you might just get bored and go like, I'm done.
I'm very curious. You mentioned your lovely wife, who's been on the show several times, and she inspired this book. But what else has this relationship between the two of you taught you?
How much time do we have?
And you're in the hot seat, brother.
No, it's not the hot seat. There's just a lot. What else has she taught me? Well, I tend to be a bit of a hermit, let's say. I'm just very happy up on the hill and, let all the, that's why I like doing What the Bleep. I could just sit back and, dream the whole thing and off it goes. So the fact that by connecting to people, by having that connection to people, and she coaches me because I'm not so good at it. She'll say like, why don't you just blah, 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 say that to someone? And I'm like, okay, let me try that. And it seems so weird, and I do it, and it works.
But I love that, though. I mean, you've mastered some of the secrets of the universe, if you will. And it still takes this powerful female being at your side
Yep.
to guide you. So you are both rising together. That's beautiful. It's incredible to witness.
Yeah.
Again, just want to thank you for all your work. I know, The Secret came out after What the Bleep Do You Know? And I believe that What the Bleep Do You Know is very much more steeped in truth and quantum physics. And I really recommend for anybody to still watch the documentary. It's still poignant today.
It's timeless.
It's timeless. It's amazing. Thank you so much. You impacted my life and you've impacted so many of my friends' lives. Thank you.
You're
Tell
very
people where they can find you and get your book.
The book is, of course, on Amazon like everything is now. I have a website. If you go to howtosuffer.me, M-E, can't believe I got that URL. Yeah, howtosuffer.me will take you there, and there's information, there's interviews, there's all the goodies that you expect in the internet these days.
You want to suffer. Check it out.
Thank you so much. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.